After a turbulent year in Turkiye-US relations, the two NATO allies have agreed to patch things up. But are both sides equally committed to mending relations? And what's at stake if they don't? I'll break it all down here on Straight Talk. Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Ayşe Süberker. Washington and Ankara continue to disagree over everything from the US's support to terror organizations in northern Syria to Turkey's purchase of the Russian S400 missile defense system. More recently, Joe Biden's failure to invite President Erdogan to his democracy summit has risked reversing the little progress made between the two leaders at their meeting in Rome in October. So what will it take to rebuild trust between the two NATO allies? Hadia Al-Alawi has this report.
Turkey and the US are NATO allies that often do not see eye to eye. And despite efforts to improve bilateral ties this year, the two remain at odds over a number of issues. President Erdogan recently said he would buy a second batch of the Russian S400 missile system despite US opposition. In response to the first purchase, the US imposed sanctions and expelled Turkey from the F-35 fighter jets program. Ankara's down payment of more than $1 billion on the F-35 jets was not refunded. Erdogan now insists on using that money to finance an F-16 fighter jet purchase, but US lawmakers have so far refused.
F-35'ten kaynaklanan bildiğiniz gibi bizim 1 milyar 400 milyon dolar bir ödememiz vardı ve bu ödemeden hareketle biz bu süreci nasıl iyi bir konuma taşırız? Bunun üzerinde durduk. Bunun üzerinde de daha çok F-16'lar gündeme geldi. F-16'ların elimizdekilerin modernizasyonu veyahut da yeni F-16'lar verilmesi konusu gündemimize geldi. Ve bununla ilgili de şu anda zaten savunma bakanlarımız süreci takip ediyorlar. Ve bu konuyla ilgili de Sayın Biden'ın ben olumlu yaklaşımını gördüğüm gibi.
The two leaders were hoping to thaw the relationship during their meeting on the sidelines of the G20 summit in October. Diplomatic ties were at an all-time low after Ankara threatened to expel the US ambassador. Biden was also the first US president to formally recognize the events of 1915 as genocide. Ankara denounced the designation, which added more tension to an already frosty relationship.
There's really no substitute for face-to-face discussions and negotiations among the leaders when it comes to building understanding and cooperation.
But despite agreeing on a joint mechanism to strengthen ties, Biden did not invite Erdogan to the Democracy Summit in December. The US is also deepening its defense partnership with Turkey's longtime rival Greece. Syria is also an ongoing point of contention.
Suriye'de bulunan bu terör örgütleri PKK, PYD, YPG gibi bunların özellikle Amerika'dan aldıkları destekler konusunda kendilerine bu desteklerle ilgili üzüntümüzü, bu desteklere yönelik NATO üyesi ülkeler olarak bunun bizde meydana getirdiği üzüntüleri ifade ettik.
Turkey has the second largest army in NATO after the US, and the White House understands its strategic importance overlooking the Mediterranean. But Ankara's perceived closeness with Moscow is bound to cause further friction in its relationship with the US. And unless the US offers a fair alternative, Turkey is unwilling to compromise its beneficial defense relation with Russia just yet. Hadia Al-Alawi, Straight Talk.
And to discuss Turkiye-US relations, I'm joined now from Washington, D.C. by Outzen, a former US diplomat. In Istanbul is Helin Ertem, an associate professor of international relations at Medeniyet University, and Matthew Bryza, a former US ambassador. A warm welcome to you all. It's good to have you on the program. Despite efforts to improve bilateral ties this year, the two countries remain at odds over a number of issues. Rich, where do relations stand between the two now?
Well, I think they're better, at least from the perspective of Washington, than I would have assumed at the beginning of the Biden administration. If you remember back a year, all thoughts were on when would President Biden or then President-elect Biden call President Erdogan, and that took a long time. Other thoughts were when would the United States and Turkey come to an agreement about how to cooperate in Afghanistan. That also took a long time. And then finally, the designation or recognition by the White House of the events of 1915 in accordance with the wishes of the Armenian community, Armenian American community,
Yes.
as a soykırım genocide. These were all heavily weighting down the relationship, in addition to the more recent problems of YPG Gülen S400s. But two things have happened in the last 6 months or so, maybe three. One is the disaster in Afghanistan, a largely self-made disaster by virtue of U.S. policy and how we conducted the withdrawal of our troops there, which Turkey proved great utility as an ally, staying with us right to the very end and still maintaining some influence in that region and helping us to pursue the residual equities that we have. The second, though, is the decision by the Biden administration and President Erdogan's team to pursue something called a joint mechanism. So this really isn't very well defined just yet.
Yes.
But what it is a commitment in principle to find some areas, to identify some areas that are fruitful for cooperation and can be sort of walled off from these structural problems in the relationship. I think those are very important. So I think that there is reason to think that 2022 is a year where we will have to cooperate more. And therefore, as bad as the equilibrium has been, I see it getting better.
So, Matthew, would you agree with Rich? I mean, at the top of the list of current disagreements between Turkey and the U.S. is the acquisition of S400 defense systems, as well as ongoing support by the U.S. to the terror organization YPG in northern Syria. Why these two allies don't see eye to eye when their primary concerns are at stake?
Well, as you and I have discussed many times on this program, and Rich and I as well, in all sorts of fora, those two issues are simply politically unresolvable right now, given where the two countries' positions stand, unless one side decides to de-escalate or both decide to de-escalate. I guess that's the point of your question. I think that Turkey is looking for a way to de-escalate on the S-400 F-35 issue, and that way is its proposal that Turkey allocate the $1.8 billion already that was supposed to go to the F-35 purchase to buy more of what Turkey already has been procuring for years from the U.S., which is F-16 fighters, 40 new ones, plus 80 kits to upgrade the existing ones. That, to me, was a powerful goodwill gesture by Ankara to find a way out of the mess. I fear that could be blocked by the U.S. Congress. However, if the Biden administration decides it can lean into that one with some political capital, which is in short supply given all the domestic challenges President Biden faces, well, that might make it through the Congress. On YPG, that is an irreconcilable issue because there are still people in Washington who either choose not to or simply do not recognize that the YPG and the PKK are one, terrorist conglomerate. And I don't know how long it'll take for that view to change. One other thing, though, that has evolved is Ukraine. Yes. And Turkey is proving to be a really important partner, I hope, for Washington on Ukraine. And when we get the readouts of Secretary Blinken with Minister Çavuşoğlu, you'll see that they discussed Ukraine, they discussed the South Caucasus, in addition to Libya and Syria. So besides the problematic issues, there are some constructive ones now on the agenda.
So, Helin, what would you like to say about the state of relations? And because it seems that the U.S. will continue to give moral and material support to the YPG terror organization, with the House allocating $117 million requested by Pentagon for this year. How to overcome this impasse, or should we just leave that aside and concentrate on different areas of cooperation?
Yeah, I think we should concentrate on the areas of cooperation, because there have always been problems in between Turkey and the United States. And in terms of alliance systems, I think it's not logical to expect that we would not have any problems. We would agree on any kind of stuff. So the natural character of alliances are that you have some disagreements. And YPG is one of the biggest and one of the most critical disagreements between Turkey and the United States. And I hope we will overcome that problem. But we should also remember that there's a kind of disagreement between Pentagon and also Foreign Ministry, Secretary of Foreign Ministry in the United States. These both ministries, they have also disagreements on the way the Biden administration should behave to Erdogan administration in Turkey. So we see that Pentagon is quite tough. And it wants to continue the support for YPG. But the other part, especially the diplomats, are trying to lower the tension between Turkey and the United States. So it will take some time. But I do believe that both administrations, both leaders have already understood that there are quite big global problems, like the rise of China, like the great power rivalry, like the problems or coming problems probably regarding Ukraine, the tension with Russia, and probably China's possible existence in the Black Sea region as well in the coming years. So I think it's very important for both administrations to focus on the cooperation areas rather than the disagreements between two parts.
Okay, before we go to a broader region, Rich, we hear about these active consultations to resolve Turkey's removal from the F-35 program. Can Turkey's purchase of F-16s help reduce tensions with the United States? And how much of a political, as Matthew just mentioned, political capital does Biden want to spend on convincing the Congress to kind of soften its stance on F-35s and F-16s?
Well, I'm an optimist on the F-16s because this is a win-win situation. There's a lot of money to be made by the U.S. corporations that are involved in the production of the F-16. It's not a new capability. Some people in Washington are very concerned about what's called QME, qualitative military edge, which means making sure no one in the region, even U.S. allies, have a significant advantage over a primary factor guiding foreign policy decisions. So I would say that because the F-16 does not outclass the F-35, because it makes money for U.S. corporations, and because Turkey has a real shortfall in air power between the time that its current F-16 fleet sort of times out and experiences maintenance problems, and it gets its own Turkish fighter online, there's a gap there, and that gap hurts NATO. It doesn't just hurt Turkey. So it's actually sort of an easy win. And yes, there are four people, the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and House Foreign Affairs Committee, the leads from each party, those four have a significant say. But on the Republican side, we think that they are giving ear to the needs of NATO and of U.S. defense industry. And on the Democratic side, if President Biden decides he wants this to go through, Menendez and the others involved will probably say yes. So I think, yes, there's reason for concern. There's always reason for concern in this bilateral relationship. But I like the way the cards are stacked right now. Okay. And I think that with a little bit of goodwill on both sides, I think we'll see the F-16s go through. Okay, so Matthew, could you talk to us about the mood in Congress? Is Turkey still seen as a toxic brand? And how have latest developments in the South Caucasus and efforts to mend ties between Turkey and Armenia been met in the Congress?
Well, I do think, unfortunately, generally, Turkey is still a toxic brand in certain corners of Congress. It's often an easy punching bag for various members in both houses of the Congress to choose to attack because of all the diaspora support, whether it be Greek or Greek Cypriot or Armenian diasporas that they want to hear those things. But as Rich was just saying, there are these strategic realities out there. And Turkey is only becoming more important strategically to the United States. Yes, in Ukraine, where Turkish drone technology has really caught Russia's attention. And Turkey has figured out how to manage relations with Russia over the centuries, having fought more wars against Russia than against any other country, if you go back to the Ottoman Empire and Russian empires. So Turkey's technology and its experience in both cooperating and confronting Russia when necessary should be really valuable to the United States strategically now. Yes, for sure, with regard to Ukraine, but also in Syria and in Libya. But I said should be. But the political realities right now are that it still is a toxic brand. But each day that passes, with the F-16 deal not going away and being possible, and I think, frankly, with President Erdogan focusing across the board on de-escalation as elections next year loom, I think the atmosphere will improve in the Congress as well.
Okay, so Helin, what's your take on that? Could a possible rapprochement between Ankara and Yerevan have positive implications on the two-country relations? Are you optimistic this time?
Yeah, I'm optimistic. It's a difficult issue. And plus, as I have always been saying, that the issues like Cyprus, issues like Turkish-Armenian relations, these are not only foreign issues, these are also domestic issues. So it's very significant for the leaders to handle with the issue successfully inside the country, inside Turkey as well. So it will depend on domestic dynamics. We should totally remember that. We should totally keep this in mind. But at the same time, there is an effort to normalize relations with many of the countries around us, including the Gulf countries, including Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and so on. So I see that on the Turkish side, there is a great effort to lower the tension with many of the capitals around us. And I think this coincides with the United States' interest, because the United States, I think it would prefer to have better relations, normal relations between many of its allies. Either it's in the Gulf, either it's in the Aegean, either it's in the Black Sea and so on, to focus on the rise of China, because the United States is already aware that it doesn't have enough energy to deal with everything.
Yes.
We know that for a long time they've been talking about offshore balancing, and according to offshore balancing, they should somehow lead from behind and use the regional countries, regional partners to deal with their own problems.
Yes.
And it's very significant for the United States to have better relations between its alliances like Turkey, the Gulf, Armenia, and so on.
Yes, so crossing from one neighbor, Armenia, to another one, rich Greece. I mean, the US State Department approved the sale of warships and also the existing frigate modernization transactions worth, I think, $2.5 billion. What's your take on this US major arms sales to Greece, and how it's going to play out?
Well, it's good business, first of all, because as we mentioned, the U.S. defense industry has to have external sales, foreign sales, in order to turn a profit. We just don't produce that much for domestic consumption. So there's always a national interest in selling. A couple things to remember here. I've heard it said by my Turkish friends that Turkey thinks about Greece occasionally, but Greece thinks about Turkey all the time. And it's true. There's a sense of palpable threat. And most of us who follow Turkish geopolitics and foreign policy closely know that Turkey has no designs, or we infer that no designs on Greek territory. There's no interest in a war or fighting. There's occasional tensions for very good reasons over resources in the Mediterranean. But for Greece, Turkey does look like an existential threat. I think there are people in Athens who really think Turkey might grab a few islands or somehow try to damage Greek forces in the Med. So part of what we're doing, I think, part of what Washington is doing is to reassure Greece. And frankly, the items that are being sold are useful also in the defense of the southern flank of NATO, in the case of instability in the Black Sea region. So I don't think it's really targeting Turkey. I understand why many of my Turkish friends are uncomfortable, both with American forces coming in for exercises and for enhanced presence, because, you know, maybe there is some thought from both U.S. and Greek diplomats that this is sending a message of sorts to Turkey. But let's keep in mind the size of Greece and the size of Turkey, the competence of the Turkish defense industrial base, as well as its own military forces. Greece is no threat, and no amount of American equipment is going to turn Greece into a threat. I don't think also that there is a desire in Washington to undercut Turkey on this, just to make sure that no mischief occurs, so to speak.
So could it be interpreted as a part of efforts to strengthen the alliance?
I think so. I mean, certainly when I talk to people like Ben Hodges, retired general who follows NATO and Black Sea the relationships very closely, the message I get is that anything that strengthens any of our NATO members in this area strengthens the whole. So it's not a zero-sum game that weakens Turkey because it helps Greece. It actually helps all of us put together a infrastructure, so to speak, or the superstructure really for greater security to deter external actors. And yes, again, there is a little bit of the friction between Greece and Turkey that makes it look like it has a second purpose. But its primary purpose is, as you said, to strengthen the alliance.
So, Matthew, how has the US's partial withdrawal from the Middle East affected the regional countries to repair ties both among themselves and with Turkey?
Well, I think the number one, when the Abraham Accords happened last year, that was a very powerful signal to the US's friends in the Gulf, as well as Egypt. Even though they weren't part of the Abraham Accords, that it's time to de-escalate across the board. I mean, yes, of course, the Abraham Accords were about Israeli relations with Arab countries, but that was a broader signal by the waning Trump administration that that Trump policy of lots of pressure on lots of countries, especially Iran, that was going away, and it was time to adjust. And so I think Turkey observed that, as did these Arab countries. And Turkey was already in the mode of wanting to de-escalate. I mean, there were already visits of intelligence senior officials from Turkey to Egypt to Saudi Arabia. And so now all of that has acquired a momentum of its own. And I think now I wouldn't even suspect now that the U.S. is playing much of a role in pushing that to happen, because that's all happening now organically. And so I think it's really important for Washington, but also all of our allies, to recognize that this de-escalation is happening, that President Erdogan is leading it for a number of reasons. Yes, the lack of robust U.S. presence in the Middle East, but also for Turkey's own domestic political reasons with an election coming. And I just came back from Athens, like literally 2 hours ago. And I was just shocked by highly sophisticated Greek business people, investors, owners of huge shipping companies, who truly do believe, as Rich was saying, as part of the Turkish election campaign, Turkey is going to do something like annex the southern part of Cyprus or seize some islands. And it's impossible to comprehend that anyone could really think that. I without being insulting, I tried to tell them, Greece is nowhere on Turkey's electoral agenda. Nobody's paying attention right now. So it would be great if Greece, we would tone down its fear a little bit as well.
So,
and maybe the U.S. is going to help.
Yeah, so Helin, what's your take on that? Do you believe a complete normalization of the region would be easy from Ankara's perspective?
Yeah, it's similar to the United States position. Both leaders, both administrations are trying to solve many problems inside the countries, inside two countries, and the economy is coming first. So I think normalization would also serve this kind of aims inside the United States and Turkey. But at the same time, regarding Turkey and its possible partners or all partners in the region, including the Arab countries, Gulf countries, I think they have they have already seen that the advantages of having good relations is better than having bad relations, because they did not earn anything concrete in this last couple of years, especially in the last 2-3 years.
Yes.
They lost more than they gained actually with this tension in the region. So they have already understood that it's better to develop normal relations again, especially between the Gulf countries, between Egypt and Turkey, and so on.
So, Rich, amid some tensions and strategic disagreements, could we say that a comparative calm counts as an achievement between the two countries?
Well, that's what we call Russian optimism, which is to say things can always get worse, right? And in this case, Turkish and American optimism. I think that we have had, if you look at the nearly 100 years of relations that the United States and the Republic of Turkey have had, we've had some real ups and some real downs. There are troughs. And I think, obviously, the 1970s with the Cyprus years and the embargo years were part of that instability in Turkey. I think we've just come out of the second deepest trough we've ever had in relations. I think that the crises that we had related to the failed coup attempt and Syria and sort of the U.S. figuring out what it's doing in Iraq and Afghanistan have been very, very corrosive to the U.S.-Turkish relationship. I think we're on an upswing, and the upswing is slight right now. But by the standards of the relationship, as you have said, this is a victory. So I am, after several years of going from crisis to crisis, the fact that we have some modest opportunities that could be missed, we'll see. To me, this is a good place to be in as we head into a new year.
So just one last question, Matthew. Are you optimistic? What can we expect the year ahead?
I am optimistic for the reasons Rich just said. Previously when I've been on here with you, I said I think the beginning of the Biden administration is going to be rough for a number of reasons. Number one, that Donald Trump was sort of like the security blanket shielding Turkey from hostile political forces in the Congress. So if you remove that, you're going to have some bumps in the road. I think those bumps are largely past us. I think that as President Erdogan, again, has decided to de-escalate, including in the Eastern Mediterranean,
yes,
the waters are calming. But if the F-16 deal goes off the rails, if it doesn't happen, then I think we're going to be in a new, maybe mini crisis, or at least one that will kill this momentum, this soft momentum we're starting to feel.
All right, Matthew, Helin, and Rich, unfortunately, we'll have to leave it here. Thank you very much for joining me on Straight Talk. And that's all for this edition of Straight Talk with me, Ayşe Süberkaş. Next time, we look ahead at a new stage in Turkey-Africa relations. And with the world economy in shatters, we ask why arms sales have skyrocketed during the COVID-19 pandemic. Until then, if you've got any comments, follow us and tweet us at Straight Talk TRT. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Until next time, take care and goodbye.